The French and Indian War began on May 28, 1754, with a skirmish in a remote area of western Pennsylvania. The battle helped ignite the 7 Years' War, which spanned 5 continents. In the American colonies, it launched the military career of young George Washington. By the end of the war, Britain's national debt had nearly doubled. The cost of maintaining her expanded empire was now rising. Somebody had to pay. Parliament's eyes turned toward the American colonies. 13 years later, an older George Washington and his fellow colonists would return the look and say no. Ever since the Norman invasion in 1066, France and Great Britain had warred with each other repeatedly. They had so far avoided conflict in North America. Then, in the 1750s, things changed. About 60,000 settlers occupied French territory on the continent. By contrast, there were over 1 million settlers in the British colonies. Competing claims to the upper Ohio River Valley began to raise tensions. The French prized the area for the fur trade. The extensive network of natural waterways enabled them to maintain lines of trade and communication. A key strategic area for control was the Forks, where the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers meet to form the Ohio River. As English colonists ventured into the Ohio River Valley, the French responded by building forts, from Lake Erie down to the Forks, where Fort Duquesne was established. Under orders from the British government to protect His Majesty's possessions in North America, Virginia's royal governor Robert Dinwiddie sent an emissary to the French. The message? Withdraw from the Ohio River Valley or face the consequences of British military action. His representative was a 21-year-old major in Virginia's provincial militia, George Washington. In December 1753, Washington delivered Dinwiddie's ultimatum to Captain Jacques Legardeur de Saint-Pierre at Fort Le Boeuf, 15 miles east of the shores of Lake Erie, in present-day Waterford, Pennsylvania. The French rejected the ultimatum. In May of 1754, with 40 men, a combination of Virginians and Iroquois warriors, Washington pulled off a sneak attack on a force of about 30 French soldiers hiding in a forested glen some 60 miles south of the Forks of the Ohio. Among those killed was Joseph Coulon de Jumonville, the French ensign for whom the battle was later named. About 8 miles away, Washington and his men built Fort Necessity. In July, it was attacked. Washington and his men were roundly defeated by a significantly larger French force, led by Captain Louis Coulon de Villiers, Jumonville's half-brother. The British persisted. General Edward Braddock led a march from Alexandria, Virginia, to the Forks. In July 1755, his troops suffered defeat at the Battle of Monongahela. Braddock was fatally wounded. Before he died, he bequeathed his officer's sash to aide-de-camp George Washington. In August 1755, British Army officer William Johnson arrived at Lac Saint-Sacrement and renamed it Lake George, after the King, George II. He built a fort there and named it Fort William Henry, after the King's grandson and brother to the future King, George III. Only in May of 1756, after 2 years of skirmishes, was war officially declared between Britain and France. The conflict, more broadly known as the 7 Years' War, would extend across Europe, colonial America, India, the Philippines, Africa, the Caribbean, and South America. In the North American theater, the French and Indian War engaged a wide range of native tribes. The Algonquin-speaking people largely supported the French, as did the Innu and Wyandot tribes. The Iroquois Confederacy comprised the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora, sided with the British. In August 1757, the French defeated the British at Fort William Henry. On July 25, 1758, the British earned a much-needed win at Louisbourg, the easternmost point of conflict in the American theater. 1 month later, the French surrendered Fort Frontenac on Lake Ontario. That loss destroyed the French forces' ability to communicate with their troops across the Ohio River Valley. On November 25th that year, the British captured Fort Duquesne, or what remained of it, as the French had burnt most of it before retreating, and built Fort Pitt nearby, named for William Pitt, the British Prime Minister. Today, the outline of Fort Duquesne can be seen in downtown Pittsburgh, also named after Prime Minister William Pitt. Between June 1759 and September 1760, British forces won battles at Fort Ticonderoga, Fort Niagara, Quebec, and Montreal. In the Battle of Quebec, British General James Wolfe was shot 3 times. Before he died, news came that the French were retreating. "Now God be praised," he said, "I will die in peace." In fact, the battle proved to be decisive for British victory in the American theater. On September 15, 1760, the British raised their flag over Detroit, the westernmost point in the entire war. The Treaty of Paris that concluded the 7 Years' War, including the American theater, was signed in 1763. In America, British territory expanded. Even Spanish Florida came under British control. Globally, the British Empire expanded, most importantly in India. Britain's national debt rose from £74 million to £133 million, or in current value, over £32 billion, or 41 billion US dollars. The British Parliament thought it was high time to tax the American colonies. The colonists would have something to say about that, including the former British officer, George Washington.